All right, so welcome to user interface. Today we're going to learn what HTML is and what it's used for in web development. We're going to learn the difference between semantic and presentational markup. And we're going to learn about CSS and how we select things with CSS and style them. So we are going to jump into this guided project here. It was posted at the beginning with all of those links, and you're going to fork this project. The fork button has actually moved in CodePen. It's now down here in the bottom right hand corner. So you can click on fork, and basically that copies this CodePen onto your account, and then you have the ability to edit it and follow along. Couple tips for success with guided projects. If you feel like it's going too fast for you to keep up, you might just want to take notes and then come back and watch the video on a slower speed and code along. Alternatively, you could open this guided project, you could fork it, and then you could reopen this original copy. And I will save frequently throughout this guided project. So if you refresh this original copy, you'll always have the most up-to-date code. Okay, so just two little tips on how to keep up with the guided project. All right, we're gonna start with HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the language that your internet browser reads. So your internet browser being Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, hopefully not Internet Explorer, but possibly Internet Explorer. So it's the language that your internet browser reads, and it's used for building the structure of your website. So if you think of a website as a house, HTML would be the foundation and the walls and the roof. CSS would be anything that made that house beautiful. So the siding, the countertops, the paint on the walls, things like that. So HTML is used for structure, CSS is used for styling, and we like to keep these two things separate, okay? And then we have semantic HTML. So semantic HTML is tags that give meaning to our content. So before HTML5 came around, a lot of developers used to mark up their websites with divs and spans. This doesn't really give any meaning to our content. They're just boxes on a page. With semantic HTML, the goal is to give some meaning to our content so that people who are blind and maybe using a screen reader understand what the content is on our page. It's also for like search engines, so accessibility, search engines, or even the next developer reading your code. Divs and spans are not bad. They're just not used to convey meaning. So things like divs are used to keep things together for styling purposes, but they're not used to convey meaning. Okay, I like to think of a div as like a little box that keeps things together so that you can easily move those things around a page or give those things a specific style. What we're going to be building together over the next week is this website here. So this is what we're going to be building together in our guided project. And let's start with the top of this website. I'm going to mark it up here. I'm going to annotate it. So we've got a section here that covers the top portion of our website. Okay, and then we've got a navigation here. It's very difficult to draw on a computer. And then we've got a logo here. So this is an image, which is already on our page. And then we've got some links here. So the links are probably in their own little box because they're moved to one side of the navigation. So they would be inside of a div. And the logo is in another box because it's moved to the other side of the navigation. So it's also in its own little div. Okay, and then we have a section here with a background image and some titles. So the very top section of a website is called a header. The very bottom section of a website is called a footer. and all of the separate sections in between are actually called sections. And then we've got titles here, and titles go from H1 to H6. And I like to think of this like an essay. So an essay only has one main title. That's H1. Okay, it's the most important title on the page. It could have lots of subtitles. That would be H2. It could have lots of subtitles of subtitles. Those would be H3s. Okay, but H1 should only appear once on your page. It's the most important title on the page. Okay, so we don't care about how the titles look because we can always change the way they look in CSS. What we care about is how important they are when we're giving them H1, H2, H3. Okay, so let's take this markup and turn this into code. I'm going to clear all my drawings here. And I'm going to go back to this code pen, and we're going to mark up this first section. So I'm going to come here on line 30, and I'm going to open an angle bracket, type the word header, close the angle bracket. Okay, that's an opening header tag. And I'm going to close the header tag down here around line 43 after these titles, but before the About Me title. Okay, so I'm going to / header. Okay. And you can see the difference between the opening tag and the closing tag is this /. Okay. Usually every opening tag has a closing tag. There are some exceptions to that rule. But it's a good idea when you open a tag to close it right away so that you don't forget to close it later on, because that can really start to break your code. Okay, the next thing we had was a navigation, and the navigation wrapped around the image and these links here. So I'm gonna open an angle bracket, type nav, and I'm gonna close the angle bracket, close the navigation tag down here. Okay, let me save that. Notice that the navigation is inside of the header. We call this nesting. Okay, so the navigation is nested inside of the header, which means that the navigation is the parent, or sorry, the navigation is the child to the header. The header is the parent, okay? This is going to be important when we get to CSS. Okay, then we said we had a box that went around the image. So a box is a div, and a box that went around the links. Okay. We'll get into naming these boxes in a little bit. Save that. We need some more information before we can fill out the links. So I'm going to leave it for now. We'll come back to it in a few minutes. We've got another group of titles here. Those titles were all moved to the center of the page together, so they're probably in a box as well. So I'm going to say div and open my div above the titles and close my div after the titles. Okay, we've got 3 titles here. I'm going to say your name. This is going to be a website about you. It's the most important title on the page. So I'm going to give that one an H1. What do you think H2 and H3 should get? So, what should your location and your title get? So what would you give your location and your title? Would you give them both H2s? Would you give one an H2 and one an H3? This is quite subjective, so you can tell me what you think and then just tell me why. Yeah, Zach would give them both H2s. TJ an H2 and an H3. Both H2 since it's not H1. Yeah, so I would say like they go for order of importance. So if you think your title and your location are just as important as each other, then I would give them both H2s. If your title is a little bit more important than your location, then I would give one in H2 and one in H3. Okay, so let's give your title in H2, and let's give your location in H3. If you want to give them both H2s, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, so our website is starting to look a little better. It's going to be ugly until we get to CSS. That is totally fine. Okay, if we go and we scroll down, we've got this next section of our website. This is the About Me section, and let me draw it up for you. I'm going to choose a different color so that it's a little easier to see. Yeah, we'll choose black. Okay, so this is the section here with the yellow background. We've got a title in this section. What do you think that About Me title should get? Yeah, I would say this one's an H2. Like, it's a subtitle, it's a title of a section, it's pretty important. I would say this one gets an H2. Okay, then you have a paragraph, and we haven't talked about this tag yet, but any text on a page should be wrapped in a P tag. So anytime you have a paragraph, you should wrap it in what's called a P tag. And then notice that the background color here is different than the background color of the rest of the section. So this is probably in its own little box, which will be a div. Okay, so a section, a div, and inside of the div, we have an H2 and a paragraph. Let's take this and translate it into code. So we've got an opening section tag, and we're going to close our section tag down here before my skills. Okay, and then we've got a div inside of that section that wraps around all of the text in the section. And then that About Me title is an H2. And we've got a paragraph here. Okay, if things are starting to get messy, you can highlight all of the code you've written so far, and you can hit Shift Tab, and that will indent the code for you. As a rule of thumb, you want code that's inside of other code to be indented one tab over or a couple spaces over. There's a war going on about tabs versus spaces. As long as it's indented, it really doesn't matter. You just want it to be able to be a little easier to read, okay? If it's indented from the thing that it's inside of, then you can see that, okay, inside of my navigation, I have a div, and inside of my div, I have an image. You can see the things that are inside of other tags a little easier. All right, the next section would be the skills section. And let's draw this up. So we've got a whole section here. Then we've got a title. And this title is also an H2. Okay, it's a title of a section. That's pretty important. And then we've got 3 different skills. Okay, so we've got an icon, a title, and a paragraph. So the icon is there for you. This title, I would probably say, is an H3. It's a subtitle of a subtitle and a paragraph. Okay, but notice that this is kind of all on one side of the page. So this would probably be inside of a div. Okay, it's in its own little box. And that box repeats itself 3 times. Okay. We're also going to wrap a big box, sorry, not around my skills, but underneath my skills. We're going to wrap a big box around all of those little boxes. And that's so that we can position them a little bit better. It's going to make a lot more sense to you on Thursday. Okay, let's clear this and let's translate this into code. So we're going to go above my skills and we're going to open a section. We're going to close the section right before the iframe. So somewhere around line 68. Your line numbers may be different than mine depending on how many spaces you've given yourself. The my skills gets wrapped in an H2. Okay. Then we have a big div. So I'm going to write a comment here. Comment in HTML looks like this. This opens the big div. Okay. Comments are really great ways to write notes to yourself or the next developer coming to read your code. They don't show up on the page, so the user doesn't see the comments. They're just a really great way to leave notes for yourself. Okay. And I'm going to close that big div right before the section closes. This closes the big div. Let me save that. Okay, and then we have 3 little divs inside, and each div has an icon, an H3, and a paragraph. Okay, so div, I'm going to close it down here. Div, we have an icon, an H3, and a paragraph. Okay, we're going to open another div here. We have an icon, an H3, and a paragraph. We're going to close the div here. And then finally, we have another div with an icon, H3, and a paragraph. And then we're going to close that div. Okay, you can highlight all of this stuff and you can hit Shift Tab to fix the spacing if you would like. I'm going to save this. All right, let me get a thread going here. Okay, thumbs up if you're with me so far. Awesome, that's lots of thumbs ups. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna go back to our website here, and I'm gonna mark up the next section. So I've got a section here that wraps around the video. Okay. Just has a video in it, so we don't have to add anything else. And then I've got another section here. That is the experience section. Goes all the way down, that whole yellow part. Okay, I've got an H2 inside of this section. And then I've got some titles, a logo, and a paragraph. But notice all of these things are kind of in a row together. So each of these are in their own div, titles in their own div, logo in their own div, paragraph in their own div, and then we probably have a box that wraps around those 3 little divs. Okay, so in the first div, we probably have like an H3 and an H4, and then we have an image, and then we have a paragraph. And this repeats 3 times. Okay, let me clear. So we can see that that repeats 3 times. So let's translate this into code. So first, around this iframe, we're just going to wrap a section tag. The iframe is in its own section. We're going to keep that contained. And we're going to open another section right above my experience, and we're going to close the section right above this form. So somewhere around line 101 or 102, we're going to close that section. So after the last paragraph there. Okay. All right, we're going to wrap an H2 around my experience. Save that. If we take a look at our website, it's starting to take form. Okay, it doesn't just look like a big wall of text anymore. We're starting to see it break up a little bit, which is nice. Okay, then we have, after the H2, we have a div. So I'm going to write a comment here. This opens the first big container. Yeah. Let me make this a little bigger so the code, you can see a little bit more of the code. Scrolling down here. There we go. Okay. And we're going to close that div. So we have titles, image, paragraph. Close the div. This closes the first big container. Okay. Inside of this big container, we have 3 little containers. So we have a div that wraps around, whoops, save. Let me refresh this, make sure. Uh-oh, code pen error. There we go. Technology doesn't always cooperate with us. Okay. That div is not closed now. This closes the first big container. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we've got a container that wraps around the titles. So we can say, this is the title container. This closes the title container. Okay, I'm going to save that. We have an H3 that wraps around title of company. We have an H4 that wraps around position title. If you want to give them both H3s, you're welcome to do so if you think they're equally as important as each other. Okay, then we have a container that goes around our image. This is the logo container. This closes the logo container. Our image is already filled in for us. And then we've got a container that goes around our paragraph. So this is the paragraph. And this closes the paragraph container. Okay, and we're adding a paragraph around this paragraph. Okay, this repeats 3 times. Okay, we can see the same thing repeats here. So we're gonna open a big div. This opens the second big div. And we close it down here. This closes the second big div. Save. Okay, I'm just gonna open and close the next big div too. So we'll say div. This opens the third big div. And this closes the third big div. Save. Okay, and then we have a little div that wraps around the titles, an H3 and an H4. Save. We have a container or a div that wraps around the image, and then another div that wraps around the paragraph. And then one more time. We're almost done. We'll take a little break shortly. We need to add our H3 and our H4. Okay. We have another div that wraps around our image. And a final container that wraps around our paragraph. All right, I'm gonna leave this up for a second. I'm gonna get another thread going. Questions go in Slido. I don't answer questions in Slack, so just make sure that you jump into Slido with those questions and I'll be happy to address them. So thumbs up when you are ready to keep going. Okay, I'll leave this up for a second so you can keep typing. All right, we've got about 27, 28 people good to go, 29. We'll give everyone another moment or so just to catch up with typing. You can always refresh that original CodePen as well if you feel like maybe the typing is a bit too fast for you and you're having trouble keeping up. Okay, final section here. So if we scroll down, we've got a final section here. Let me get another thread going. Who remembers what the last section is called? If we've got header for the top section, what is the bottom section called? Yeah, awesome. It's called a footer. So let's mark this footer up. It goes all the way here. This is our footer. We've got an H2. We need to add this. It's actually missing from the page. So we've got an H2 here. We've got a form, which is already built for us. And then we've got a navigation down here with some links. Okay. And inside of our links, we have icons. So I'm going to clear this. We'll jump over here and translate this into code. So after that closing section tag from the experience section, you're going to open an angle bracket, type the word footer, close the angle bracket, and you're going to close your footer down here on your last line of code. After the footer tag, you're going to open and close an H2 tag, and you can type get in touch. Okay. The form has been built for you, so we don't have to build that form, but we do want to wrap a navigation around those I tags at the bottom. And again, we need a little bit more information to fill out the links inside of the navigation, so we'll do that right after the break. Okay, I've saved that code in case you need it updated. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to answer some questions in Slido. I'll give you a 5-minute break and then we'll keep going. Let me close this now. We don't need this anymore. And Slido, here we go. There are so many divs. Is the main reason for this being that we have control over each and every bit of content within that div when we want to go style it in CSS? Yes. So the reason why you would put a div is because it's like a box that goes around elements that you want to move together. I like to think of it this way. I'm sure a lot of you have like little brothers and sisters at home or little cousins, and they like to play with Lego. So you have Lego, it's all over the floor. And if you wanted to move all of that Lego to another room, you could pick it up piece by piece and walk every piece over to the next room individually. You may be there until next year doing that. Or you could grab a container. You could throw all that Lego in the container, and then you could pick up the container and move the container to another room. Okay, that's the purpose of a div. You want to be able to pick up that container, that div, and move everything inside of that container to a different location without having to try and position everything inside of that container individually. So that is the purpose of a div. It's not semantic. It doesn't describe our content, but it is useful for styling. So really good question. All right. How are we going to differentiate all of the different divs while we're writing our CSS code? That is a great question, Tyler. After the break, we're going to go into attributes, which are extra pieces of information that we can add to tags, and I will show you how to do that. Really good question. Does a div also give spacing when used? Oops. Does a div also give spacing when used as a child nested multiple times? So a div is what is called a block element, means that it takes up the entire width of the web page and pushes everything underneath it to a new line. We'll get into a bit more of that on Wednesday. So we'll get into some more detail on Wednesday as to inline versus block elements. Do we have to put a comment at the opening and closing of each div? Is it good practice, or are you just doing that for current presentation purposes? So comments, totally up to you whether or not you want to use them. I would suggest using them as like little notes to yourself when you are learning how to code. You're going to go back and look at these guided projects 6 months from now, and if you have no comments inside of them, you're going to have trouble kind of understanding what they mean or what you were doing. So they're a great way to leave little notes to yourself. They're also a really good way to communicate to the next developer looking at your code. So your users won't see those comments on the web page. So feel free to leave those notes for yourself. However, if users inspect your web page or view your source code, they can see the comments. So make sure to keep the language kosher, no swear words, things like that. So they are little notes for yourself that your user isn't going to see, but if the user really wanted to dig in and see those comments, they could. So just be aware of that. My CodePen seems not to be auto-filling tags. Is there a setting I'm missing? So it doesn't automatically autofill tags if you want to, like I've been typing out all the tags, but if you want to just make the tag open and close, you would type the tag name and then hit tab. Is it okay if we use the Analyze HTML tool? I went a little div crazy. I don't know what the Analyze HTML tool is, so I'm not sure. I would say try to follow along with what I'm showing you here on the guided project. How do we fix the tabbing of the section again? Good question. You highlight all of the code and you hit Shift Tab. So Shift Tab will fix the indentation for you. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna give you a 5-minute break. So let me get 5 minutes on the timer. And when you get back, we're gonna talk about tags with attributes. See you in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, Web35. So let's jump back into the guided project. We've built most of the HTML. Now we need to learn a little bit more to finish up. So we are going to talk about tags with attributes. Some tags have attributes that are required. For example, the image tag, it has an attribute of src. This is a required attribute. So the image tag tells the browser, hey browser, display an image here. The src tells the browser where to go and find the image that we want it to display. The image tag also has a alt attribute. This is not required, but it's strongly encouraged. The alt attribute is a description of the image in words. This is for people who may not be able to view your website, so they'll be using a screen reader. The screen reader will read out the alt description to them. Okay. Another tag with a required attribute is an anchor link or an A tag. This is what you would use for a link on your page. It looks like this: a href equals quotations, close your angle bracket, close your tag. Okay, let's talk about what this tag does. So the A tag is telling the browser, hey browser, there's a link here. The href is telling the browser where to go when the user clicks on the link. And what goes in between the opening and closing A tag is what the user sees on the page. So the user sees the word home. Okay, we could send the user to an external website here. Like we could send them to Facebook by saying http://facebook.com. That would send them to an external website. If we wanted to link internally within our page, we need another attribute. So we have an attribute called an ID. An ID is not required. We can give it to any tag. There's a couple rules about an ID. It can only be used once on a page. So if I give something the ID of Superman, I can never use the ID of Superman again on my page. Okay, it's case sensitive. We can't use any special characters, but we can use dashes or underscores. So I'm actually going to add an ID to each of the sections on my page that I want to link to. So header, I'm going to go in the opening tag. Attributes always go in the opening tag. I'm going to go after the R, before the closing angle bracket, type a space, ID equals. Okay, it's going to be when someone clicks on that home link, I want the browser to bring them to the top of the page. So I'm just going to call this ID home. Okay. You don't have to call it home. You can call it whatever you want. You could call it shiny pink unicorn, and it's still going to work as long as you reference it. But try to name your IDs something that are going to make sense. Okay. And then how would I reference an ID or call an ID? So how do I reference an ID? So how would I refer to this ID of home, either for styling purposes or in my href? How do I call an ID? Any guesses? Yeah, so we use this sign here, the pound sign, the hashtag, the octothorpe, whatever you want to call it. So it's hashtag home. So hashtag and then the ID name. Okay, we're going to add an ID to each of the sections that we're going to reference. So we can say a href equals quotations, closing angle bracket, close your tag. We'll add this anchor link to each of these links. And then we're going to go and fill in our IDs. A href equals your tag. And close your tag. And then we're going to find each of these sections and we're going to add an ID in the opening tag of the section. So we'll scroll down to the About section. We'll find that opening section tag. We're going to say ID equals quotations. And then I'm just going to call this one About. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to find the skills section. I'm going to find that opening section tag. Say ID equals skills. I'm going to find the experience section. I'm going to find that opening section tag and say ID equals, and I'm just going to call this one work. Work is shorter than experience, so that way I don't have to type out experience every time I want to reference it. And then I'm going to find the footer, that opening footer tag, and say ID equals contact. Save that. And then I can reference each of them up here in my navigation. So I can say hashtag about, hashtag skills, hashtag work, hashtag contact. Okay. If I save this and I click on contact, contact, there we go, got to spell it correctly, save. So if I click on contact, it should bring me to the bottom of my page. Okay. About should bring me to the top of the About section. Experiences should bring me to the top of the experience section. Skills should bring me to the top of the skills section. And home should just bring me to the top of the page. Okay. IDs are great for anchoring to things within a page. You can apply styles to an ID, but that's not their primary purpose. A class is more appropriate for styling because a class name we can use as many times as we want on a page, whereas an ID we can only use once. Okay, our goal is to write dry code, which means do not repeat yourself. So if we have lots of things on the page with the same style, a class would be more appropriate than an ID. And a class looks similar. So if we go into the About section and we wanted to give this div inside of the About section like its own little name so that we could target it specifically, we would come in here and give it a class. So class equals something like text. Okay. And then how would I reference a class? Let me get a thread going here. How do I reference a class? Yeah, so a period or a dot and then the class name. So I could say dot text, background orange. Okay, and it would take the div of text and change the background color to orange. So IDs are for anchoring to different sections on your page. If an ID already exists, you can apply a style to it. Classes are more appropriate for styling. So if you are just naming something to style it, use a class over an ID. Okay, I'm gonna save that. Okay, the last thing we want to do is come down here to the footer, and we want to wrap links around each of these icons, and we want to send the icons to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter when the user clicks on them. Right, so we're going to say href equals, okay, we're going to close our angle bracket and then close our A tag. So that icon, that I tag, is in between the opening and closing A tag because that's what the user sees on the page. They see this little Facebook icon. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. href equals, and then we're going to close our A tag. href equals, close your angle bracket, and then close your A tag over here. Okay. Inside the href is the address that I want to send the user to when they click on the icon. So the first one's Facebook. I want to send them to Facebook. So I'm going to say http://facebook.com. Okay, you could say like / the page name. Same thing with Instagram. http://instagram.com / the user's profile. Same thing with Twitter. http://twitter.com. As a general rule of thumb, if you are linking within your page, you probably don't want things to open in a new tab. But if you are sending the user elsewhere, so if you're sending the user away from your page, you probably want those links to open in a new tab. Get another thread going. Does anyone know how you would get a link to open in a new tab? Yeah, awesome. We've got some right answers. So it's an attribute called target. Okay, that can go before or after the href. It doesn't really matter. And we set it equal to _blank. Okay, this will get your link to open in a new tab. So target equals _blank. Target equals _blank. Okay. And if we want to test this, so if we clicked on Twitter, for example, it should open up Twitter here in a new tab. Okay. All right, so that is all of our HTML built. We're gonna stop here for a moment. I'm gonna see if there's any questions, and then we're gonna keep going with some CSS. Is it essential to always assign a section before introducing a div? For example, if you assigned a div without a section, would that just not make sense? So a section is semantic, a div is not. So a div is only used for styling purposes. It is not to give any meaning to your content. So you should have a section if there is a section there. So for example, if we go to like lambdaschool.com, okay, notice here, let me annotate this. Like we've got a header here. Okay, it's the very top section of our website. And then we've got a section here. We can see that it's kind of gray. It's a different color. Okay, then we've got a title here. And then each of these things are probably in their own box. Okay, so we probably have a div here. We probably have a div here. So these things don't need to be semantic because they're just a container inside of a section. But this section is different from the header. So the section needs to be there. Okay, it needs to be semantic. Let me clear that. Does that make a little bit more sense to everyone? Let me get a thread going here. Does that make sense? When you would use a section versus a div? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. What are IDs used for? So the primary purpose of an ID is used to anchor to different parts of a page, just like we did with our navigation. So if we go back to our navigation, we have like hashtag home. If we click on home, it's gonna bring us to the section with the ID of home. If we click on about, it's gonna bring us to the section with the ID of about. If an ID already exists, you can absolutely use it for styling purposes, but you would never add an ID just for the purpose of styling. Why? Because you can only use an ID name once on a page. So if you're adding an ID to everything just to style it, it's really inefficient. A class is a much better use case for styling. Okay. Let me go back here. Perfect. So the underscore blank is code that lets us go to the website linked. No, the underscore blank will open the website in a new tab. So target equals underscore blank opens your link in a new tab. What are the notes as tags? Does that work the same in VS Code? Yes. So comments in HTML work the same in VS Code. So if we go back, don't forget that exclamation mark here in the opening comment tag. So that is your opening comment tag. Your closing comment tag is down here. That will also work in VS Code. This is how you write a comment in HTML. So I am a comment. Are IDs like variables? No. Variables are JavaScript. We don't really get to those until next week. Can you add a hashtag home to the bottom of the page so it scrolls all the way back to the top? Yeah, if you wanted to add another link, you could. So if we wanted to do that, it would look like this. So we could scroll all the way to the bottom of the page and we could say a href equals click here to go to the top. Okay, and if we wanted to make this go to the top, then we would reference the ID of home. And since the header has the ID of home, it would bring us to that top section. Okay, so if I click on this, it's going to bring me to the top. Technically, if you add a class to a section, could you still style it similar to, you could still style it similar to a div tag, right? I don't really understand what you're asking here, Lena. So a class you can style the same way that you can style a div. Like you're likely gonna add a class to a div tag so that you can differentiate in between the divs. I like to think of a class as a way of like naming something so that you can specifically target it for styling. So I hope that answered your question, but I'm not exactly sure what you're asking here. What's the main difference between an ID and a class? A class can be used multiple times on a page. An ID can only be used once. So if I have a class called Superman, I can use it 500 times on my page if I want to. And anything with that class will get the styles that I've given to that class. An ID can only be used one time on a page. Okay, so once I use the ID of Superman, I can never use it again. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we're going to jump into some CSS after the break and start making this web page look beautiful. So I will see you in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, Web35. Let's jump back into our guided project. I'm going to pull up the CSS tab so we can start writing some CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. This means that the browser reads your styles from the top of the sheet down. What that means is that you could overwrite a style of the same specificity underneath another style. So you have to be careful. If you're not using a style anymore, you want to delete it rather than rewrite it somewhere else. Okay. CSS is made up of rules, selectors, properties, and values. It looks like this. So if I say H3, curly brackets, color red. H3 is my selector. I've got my curly brackets, and all of my properties and values for H3 go inside of my curly brackets. And this entire thing is a CSS rule. Okay, I can also say like font size 20 pixels. What is this rule doing? So let me get a thread going. What does this rule say? So tell me in English what this rule is saying. Yeah, awesome. It's saying take every single H3 on the page, change it to the color red and the font size of 20 pixels. What if the H3 of your location, what if I wanted that one to be orange? How would I do that? Okay, this is where a class would come in handy because selecting H3, it's not specific enough. We want to get more specific. So I would find that specific H3, it's in my header, and I would give this a class. Let's call it special. Okay, I could target .special, and I could say color orange. A-N-G, got to spell orange correctly. There we go. So that specific H3 has now changed to the color orange. Every other H3 on the page remains red. Okay. This would select anything with the class of special. So if I wanted to go and give the class of special to this paragraph would also turn orange. If I wanted to get really specific here and just select the H3 with the class of special, I could put the H3 in front of .special. What this says is take the H3 with the class of special and change it to the color orange. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to select elements in CSS. So the first is what we just saw. We can call an element by its name. We can just say H3, color red, and this will choose every single H3 on the page. If we want to get more specific, we can select a class. Okay, and this will choose everything with the class name. Color, we want to make it different. There we go. Okay, we can also use an ID if an ID already exists, but we would never add an ID just for a style. So we could say hashtag about, background, purple. Okay, no one promised this was going to be pretty. We could also use something called parent-child selectors. So that's selecting something within something else. So if I wanted to select the H2 inside of the section of about, I could say hashtag about space H2, and I could say color pink. Okay, and then that specific H2 would change to the color pink. With a parent-child selector, you're always reading from right to left. So it's the H2 inside of the section of about. All right, I want you to get some practice with this. So we're going to try our first breakout group. I'm going to give you this code pen here. So let me drop that into Slack. And I'm gonna send you to breakout rooms. So breakout rooms are like smaller rooms where you can unmute yourself, someone can share their screen, and you're gonna get an amount of time to work through as many problems as you can and solve this with your little group. And then we're gonna come back to the main classroom and we're gonna do it together. So the goal isn't necessarily to solve all of the questions, it's just to get you actively thinking, and you're just gonna try and solve as many as you can. So don't worry if you don't solve all of them in the given time. The purpose of breakout rooms is to get you actively thinking. So it's not a break. There will be TLs jumping in between the breakout rooms to make sure that you're there, that your camera's on, that you're unmuting yourself and participating. But yeah, just try to work through as many of these as you can. So I'm gonna send you to your breakout rooms now. You will get a prompt to join your breakout room. There we go. You can click on the prompt, open all rooms, and I will call you back when the time is up.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So you should get a prompt that prompts you to join the breakout rooms. If you're not getting a prompt, make sure that you have Zoom downloaded for tomorrow and just work on the breakout room on your own for today. Starting tomorrow, if you are not joining breakout rooms, you will be marked absent for the guided project. So you need Zoom to be downloaded. You need to be joining the breakout rooms and participating. right, welcome back. If you're back in the main room, let me know how that went. Were you able to try some of these challenges? How many challenges did your group solve? There's a thread in the Web35 main channel, so give me an emoji, give me something. Let me know how that went. We'll just wait for everybody else to get back. Just gonna pause this. Okay, if you're just getting back, let me know in that thread in Web35 how that breakout room went for you. How many challenges did your group manage to solve? Were you able to get started? How did that go? There's about 25 of you back in the main channel. I want to see lots of replies on that thread. How did the breakout go? How many challenges did your group solve? All right, we're starting to get some replies now. Perfect. I'll open up this breakout and we can definitely do it together. Got all of them. Amazing, you guys are fast. Okay, let's do this together. Can you change all of the P tags to have a font size of 20 pixels? Let me get a thread going here. How do I select all of the paragraphs on the page? So what is my selector if I want to select every single paragraph on the page? Yeah, P, and we want to open and close some curly brackets. Not .p because it's not a class, not hashtag P because it's not an ID, it's an element, so we are just saying P. Okay, and then we can say font dash size 20 pixels. Okay, and now the font size has changed. The second question says, can you add a new class and write a matching CSS rule to turn the last paragraph blue? So let me get a thread going here. What's my first step here? How would I solve problem 2? What's the first thing you had to do? Create a class. Create a class, yeah. So I'm gonna scroll down to the last paragraph and I'm gonna create a class. I'm gonna give this a class of last. Let's save that. Save. Let me, there we go, saved this time. Let me refresh the code pen. There we go. We've got a class of last, awesome. Now we're gonna target that class. So to target a class, we use a dot and then the class name. We can open and close our curly brackets and we can say color blue. Okay, the last paragraph has now turned to blue. Oh, there's another last paragraph here. Delete that class name. Save. Turn all of the paragraphs with the class of warning to the color red. Let me get another thread going here. What is my selector for number 3? Yeah, we could do it 2 ways. We could say dot warning. That would select everything with the class of warning, or we could get really specific and we could say p dot warning. And that would select all of the paragraphs with the class of warning. And we're going to change those to the color red. Okay. Can you write a single rule that targets both Batman and warning and changes the font size? Okay, so how would I do this in a single rule? Let me get a thread going. How do I do this in one line? One rule. Yeah, so since I was specific up here and I used p.warning, I'm gonna have to use p.warning, comma, p.batman. Okay, the comma is either or. So let me write a comment here. Comma in CSS is or. Okay, so anything with any paragraph with the class of warning or any paragraph with the class of Batman. We want to change the font size. Let's make it really big so we can tell that it's changed. Okay. If I did it without the comma, so space is looking for something inside of something else. Okay, so if I did p.warning space p.batman, I'm looking for the paragraph of Batman inside of the paragraph of warning. Okay, that doesn't exist, so this isn't going to work. Okay, let me write that as a comment. This is looking for a paragraph of Batman inside of a paragraph of warning. Okay. If I do these together with no space, so if I said .warning, .batman, in this case, it's looking for both classes. Okay. So looks for an element with both classes. So it would look for an element that satisfies both of these conditions, that it has a class of warning and it has a class of Batman. Okay. So the first answer is correct. We want to use a comma. Finally, the last one, can you change the spans inside of the last paragraph to the color orange? Let me get a thread going here. How do I target a span inside of the last paragraph? It's actually in the second last paragraph here. It's up here. Yeah, there's no span here. Let's add a span here. Span. Yeah, dot last space span. So we're going to target the last paragraph, and then we're looking for the span inside of it, and we want to change it to the color orange. Okay, so that's how this specific word is a different color. We've wrapped a span around it, and we've looked for the span inside of the last paragraph. I'm going to save that. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is specificity. So what happens when you write two rules for a single element? Which one gets picked? So the short answer is the most recent specific. Long answer is that CSS calculates specificity based on how we write the selector. Okay. So I'm going to put this into Slack as a thread. And if we write a selector for all the paragraphs on the page, and we change all the paragraphs on the page to be blue, and then we write another selector for just the paragraphs with the class of warning, which one gets picked? So what is your vote here? Does blue win or does red win? Which one is more specific? Yeah, so in this case, if your vote was red, you are correct. So it would look like this. If I said P, color blue, it would change every paragraph on the page to be the color blue. But P.warning color red, those paragraphs with the class of warning stay red because P dot warning is more specific than just saying P. All right, I've got another one for you. What about two rules for the same thing? Okay, so what if I had selected all of the P tags and I changed it to red, and then underneath I selected all of the P tags and I changed it to purple? Now which one wins? Actually, let me go back to the guided project. We'll show an example here. All right, most people are saying purple. If you said purple, tell me why. If you said red, tell me why. So justify your answer. And let's see, P color. And the first one was red. Okay, so every paragraph on the page is now changed to red. And I'm going to come down here and say P color purple. And all of the paragraphs have changed to purple. So if you said purple, you're correct, and I'm going to tell you why you're correct. So in this case, the cascade is what is ruling this. So P color red and P color purple are of equal specificity, but color purple comes after color red, and the browser is reading your style sheet from the top down. So it's choosing the most recent rule, which is purple, only if they are of equal specificity. Okay. One more. We've got dot wrapper P with the color green and P with the color red. So now which one gets picked? Is your vote red or green? And try and answer in those threads. Yeah, green. I think most people are saying green. Green because it's more specific, okay? Every paragraph on the page will change to red, but the paragraphs inside of the wrapper will change to the color green. All right. Good luck for you. I have another practice. So we'll do this practice, we'll take it up, and then I'll take questions and give you another little break. So let me drop this into the main channel. I'm going to send you to those rooms again. You'll get different rooms this time. And I'll put 5 minutes on the clock for you to practice. So go ahead and join that breakout room and see how far you can get in 5 minutes. All right, I see a few people back in the main channel. I'm assuming that you finished early. That's awesome. Let me get a thread going. How did that breakout go? Any gotchas? Or did you manage to solve all of the questions? So if you're back in the main channel, I do want to hear from you. Please don't make me call you out. I have Dion, I have Clarissa, I have Prince, I have Steven. Let me know how that breakout went for you. Okay, and I'm going to call everyone else back. There we go. So they'll take a minute to get back here. All right, if you're back in the main room, welcome back and let me know how it went. Any gotchas this time? Any questions that you particularly struggled with? Okay, I do want to see about 15 replies on that thread, 17 replies. There's lots of you back in the main room. Had issues with the first one. Okay, no worries. We'll go over that together. Looks like everyone's coming back now, so I'm going to pause the timer. Reply to that thread. Let me know how it went and if there were any particular struggles, and we will do this together. Okay, the first one said, style the links inside the nav. Change the color and the font size. So let me get a thread going here. What do I select to style the links in the nav? What was my selector for number one? Yeah, nav space A. So we're targeting the links inside of the navigation. So nav space A. We don't want to give each link a class. We can just target all the links inside of the navigation. And we want to say color, and let's change the color. And then we also want to change the font dash size. Okay, so now the links inside the navigation have changed. Next, we want to style the links inside of the paragraph. We want a different color and a different font size. So if the links inside of the navigation is nav space A, how do I select the links inside the paragraph? How would I select these links here? Yeah, awesome. P space A. So remember, it's a little p, but P space A. Okay, so I can say font dash size, let's say 40 pixels, and color pink. Okay, we can see now the links inside the paragraph are different. All right, select all of the list items on the page and change them to green. So we can see we've got a bunch of LI tags here. How would I select every LI on the page? How do I select every list item? Yeah, nothing fancy here. I can just call the element by its name. I can just say LI. Okay, and then I can change the color to green. And now all of the list items on my page have changed to green. The grocery list, I noticed some of you said you had problems with this, so let's do it together. We want to change the grocery list to our favorite color. Okay, so first of all, we've got to select the class of groceries. Okay, we've got an unordered list with a class of groceries and an unordered list with a class of sports. So to select groceries, we're going to say dot groceries. And then we're actually targeting the things inside of groceries. And inside of groceries, we have LI. So we'll say space LI and then color, and you can change the color to your favorite color. Okay. All right, let's stop here. If you've got some questions, get them into Slido. I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute break, chance to get up, walk away from your computer, stretch. We'll see you in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, Web35. Let's answer some questions. Okay, do you recommend writing out HTML first and then applying CSS, or is it something you would do all at once? Usually I like to write my HTML first and then I go and write my CSS, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to do it. I think you'll figure out a rhythm and a flow once you start to code a little bit more. But as a general rule of thumb, I like to plan out my websites. So I'll take my website, I'll draw it out on a piece of paper, I'll circle things and mark everything up, and then I'll start coding it. So I would plan like things that look the same. I would probably give them all the same class in HTML. And I would really plan out my website before I start building it. Is it best to use a space between selector and value, color red versus color red? That is absolutely personal preference. So spaces don't matter in CSS, so you can use a space if you'd like, or you can leave no space. However, it's easier for you to read. But I do recommend putting things on different lines. So like saying P, color red, font dash size 10 pixels. Like I would put different rules on different lines so that they're easier to read. You can put them on the same line. Again, like spacing doesn't matter, but it's going to be much harder to see a mistake if you have like 50 rules on the same line versus each rule on its own line. Okay. Should we be forking and saving all the practice questions? I would. That way you can refer back to them. So I would fork everything that I'm giving you so that you can refer back to it later. I'm not completely clear on what the A is for. Can you please clarify? Absolutely. So let's ask that question to the class just to make sure everyone's on the same page. What is the A for? So when we're selecting like nav space A, what is the A referring to? Yeah, the anchor tags. So if we go back to our code pen here, where was the class? There we go. So if we're saying nav space A is the name of this tag here. Okay, this tag has an attribute called href, but it is still an A tag. So this A is the tag name. So we're referencing this A tag inside of the nav, or we're referencing this A tag inside of the paragraph. So that is what the A refers to. Good question. All right. One more thing I want to show you guys before we talk about the projects, something called a pseudo selector. So there's a couple of different ones that you can use, but one that you'll probably use most often is the hover. And hover creates a cool effect like this. So it's styles that get applied only when a user hovers over those styles. Okay. And it looks like this. So if I wanted to write a hover for all of the links inside of my navigation, I could write nav space A colon hover. And I could change the color to be green, for example. Okay, so my links have not turned green. This rule only applies when the user hovers over the link. Okay. So that is what the hover pseudo selector does. You can also do visited, for example. So I could say nav space A colon visited. And that would be when someone clicks on the link. So I could say color pink. Okay. So if I scroll back up here, this is going to stay pink because you've already visited it. Not as popular, but you may use it. And then there's also active. So nav space A colon active. Active happens when the user is actively clicking on something. So this isn't used very often because it's like a 2-second change. So I can change this to orange, for example. So when I'm clicking on the link, it changes to orange, but it's just that 2-second change. So it's not quite as used. And then there's also focus. So focus is usually used for forms, and it focuses on like the input in the form. So input colon focus, we could do something like a border, 10 pixels, solid purple. Okay, so when I'm clicked into that form field on either one of the inputs, then the focus gets applied. So focus is for forms. Okay, these are called pseudo selectors. It's a pretty cool way to make your project look a little bit more advanced without doing a whole lot of work. And as a general rule of thumb, you're going to want to add a hover. So add a hover to anything clickable on your site. Okay. You can technically add a hover selector to anything, but if I hover over something and it changes color, usually as a user, I'm going to think that that thing can be clicked on. So you're going to want to add it to anything clickable on your site. So buttons, links, things like that. These ones aren't used as much. Let me save that. Another tip on getting started. So usually I like to write some comments in my CSS. I would write things like general styles. General styles are things that are applied generally to your entire website. So for example, the body, you might set like a line height that controls the space between lines. It takes the font size and multiplies it by this number. You might add some space on the inside of your sections. So section, you might say padding at the top and the bottom, maybe 4%, 0 on the left and right. So these are just things that you might add generally. You might take all of the anchor links on the page and remove the underline. Text decoration, none. You might add some letter spacing to space out the links a little bit more. So these are just things that you're generally adding to your site. And then I would just go section by section. So I would say header, section, styles, and write all of the styles for my header. About section styles, write all of the styles from my about section. So when your CSS style sheet becomes like 300, 400, 900 lines long, you're going to want to be able to easily find things. So this is just a really good way to keep things organized. Okay, let's jump on over to the training kit. We'll talk about today's projects. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom of the training kit where it says projects. These are things that you have to complete. All of the challenges in the training kit are just for you. They're for extra practice. They're optional, but strongly encouraged. The projects are what you have to hand in each day. So today you have 2 projects. We're going to click on the first one. Today your projects are in CodePen. Tomorrow when you learn GitHub, then we're going to be using VS Code a little bit more. So your first step is to fork this pen so that it's yours. So you're going to fork the pen down here. And then you're going to practice marking up the content using semantic HTML tags. Okay, so kind of like what we did today, you're going to mark up all this content in HTML. Okay, you're going to save this. Then you're going to jump into the next project, which is this Sweet Eats Bakery. This is practicing CSS. So again, you're going to fork the pen. And then you're going to explore the CSS and you're going to update the CSS where it asks you to update it. So update the font size to 60 pixels and center the text. You're going to do that here. Update the font size to 30 pixels. You're going to do that here. So you're going to go through and follow all of those comments. When you're finished the projects for today, you're going to jump over to your calendar. So let me open up my calendar again. And right here in this module retrospective form, you're going to click on that. what did you study? It's going to be user interface 1. And the link to your project, you can put the URLs to your code pens. So this one and this one. And you can separate them by a comma with no space if you want them both on the same form. Okay, so you're going to put them both on this line, separate them with a comma, but no space. And that gets submitted to your team lead so that they're able to view and grade your project. A 1 is that you didn't quite meet MVP. You need a little bit more help with your project. A 2 is that you've met MVP. And a 3 is that you've hit at least one of the stretch goals. So stretch goals are there to challenge you. If you've finished the project early and you need a bit more of a challenge, I would aim to do stretch goals every day, especially in the first week. Try to get those stretch goals in. If you don't, not a big deal, but the stretch goals are there to make you better. So at Lambda, you don't get any degree, you don't get any sort of special certificate for completing the program. All you leave with is your skills. And the more skills that you get, the more hireable you're going to be. So I would challenge yourself and do those stretch goals. Another quick thing that I want to mention before I take final questions and send you to lunch is this color here. A lot of people can't see the change in this color because it is only slightly different from black. So if I take this color and I paste it into Google, we can see that this is the color here. So if you create a universal selector and you change it to this color, you may not notice that change so much on the page. What you might want to do is change it first to like the color red so you can see that that selector is working, and then go back and change it to this color. Okay, that's a question we get a lot on day 1. So this is the color. That's why you may not notice the change. It's only slightly lighter than black. All right, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to take some final questions and then I will let you go for lunch. Would just using nav work as well? I'm assuming that you're asking about targeting the links inside of the navigation. No, nav would target the navigation, not the links inside of the navigation. So if you're looking to put a hover selector on the links inside of the navigation, you want to get specific. So for example, if I go back here and I say nav:hover, color purple. Okay, it's not working. Okay, the links inside of the nav are what you're targeting. How is the pseudo class hover handled on cell phones since there's no real mouse pointer? It would work on a tap. In that case, it would work on a tap on cell phones, but you would likely not put a hover selector if you were writing styles for mobile. You'd likely just take that hover selector off for mobile. Do we use the star in CSS? Yes, the star is the universal selector. So it selects every single element on a page. One more thing I want to touch on, you don't need to memorize every single property and value. If you don't know something, don't be afraid to look it up. You can always Google things. Googling is totally allowed. So you can say like, how do I make the first letter of every word capital? CSS. And the first thing that comes up is this text transform property, and we've got 3 values. Capitalize will make the first letter of each word capital. Uppercase will make all of the letters capital. Lowercase will make all of the letters lowercase. And none is that the element won't be altered. Okay, so you don't have to memorize this stuff. You can always look it up. Don't be afraid to Google and use your resources. No one's expecting you to memorize every property and value in CSS. The end only shows to submit project UI1. Is that a typo? Yeah, you need to submit both projects today. So if we go back to the training kit, if you only submit one, you are not going to meet MVP for today. You need to do both of these projects. Okay. Should we save the guided project just for any help? We don't need to turn anything in. Yeah, the guided project is just for you to reference. They get really useful when you get to your sprint challenge to pull up all those guided projects so you have them available to reference easily. I would say even more useful once we get to JavaScript, and sometimes things are a little bit harder to look up. So definitely fork these guided projects, save them somewhere. They're on your CodePen dashboard, and then that way you can just refer back to them whenever you need to. The nav question was for changing the anchor color before you covered hovered. Yeah, either way, you're changing the anchor tags, not the nav. So you want to select nav space A. You want to get specific there. The demonstrate mastery section, the stretch goals, is the demonstrate mastery section the stretch goals for the project? No, the stretch goals are right in the project. So that's a good question. Let's go back here. So it'll say right here, stretch task, stretch task, stretch task, and stretch task. The demonstrate mastery in the training kit, those are like extra challenges for you to work on. Okay, so I would encourage you to do these challenges before you jump into guided projects so that guided projects don't feel quite as fast for you. So guided projects should really just be a review of what you've gone over the night before and a place for you to ask questions. That's what makes guided projects really useful. You shouldn't be learning anything for the first time in the guided project. Should just be a refresher. So those demonstrate mastery challenges, you're going to want to do those either in the morning or in the evening. All right. See if there's any final questions. Do we meet again after the project time? Not with me, but you will meet with your TLs today. They will meet with you later today. How can you turn in the project again? Yeah, let's go back to the calendar. Right here where it says project, wrap, and report, it's this module retrospective form. You are copying the URLs and pasting them in this box with a comma, no space. If you get stuck on that, no worries, just post in the help channel and we will help you out. All right, I'm gonna stop here. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy day one. Make sure you take a break before you start that project, and I will see you this afternoon in the help channel. Bye, everyone.